You can't have a 30% like three-way split. You can't have a three-way split at running back and not have any of the running backs have touchdown equity. It's just not going to work in terms of playability for fantasy. So don't even try.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here to do part 2 of the Week 2 preview. I titled that wrong on my my little note sheet here. A little inside baseball for you there. I made a typo. Pretty cool stuff. But yeah, I'm here to do part 2 of the Week 2 preview. Get you guys all set for the games going into Sunday. If you did miss part 1, it came out on Thursday morning, was recorded on Wednesday night, and that was Vinny and Don, the return of the DON, going in depth on the first 8 games, including the Thursday night game, which happened last night. I'm recording this on Friday. Again, inside baseball. Pretty cool stuff, right? So if you did miss that, make sure you go back and listen to it. It was really a great podcast. It was like riding a bike for Don, and tons of actionable info. Within just the first couple of minutes, I found myself having to go get a pen and paper to make a note so that I remembered to do more research on David Montgomery as a potential contrarian play at running back this week, with in a game where they are projected to win by 5.5 points against the New York Giants. So tons of actionable information, and they completely nailed the Bengals Browns game last night. They basically said Chubb and Odell rebound games. They said Mixon goes off, and they said Burrow does a lot through the air. They said Boyd and Green would be the main targets, which was true. Green did not do a ton with those targets, and I not to get too much into next week's podcasts, but I feel like that's going to be a major point of discussion. Is AJ Green's workload? Does that mean he is set up for some big success, or does the fact that he hasn't succeeded with the workload so far mean that he is washed? I haven't quite made my mind up on that, but we'll save that for next week because we have a lot to get to. We have the other 8 games here, going through the slate, and I guess I'll just jump right into it. Sorry, one thing again, and if you listen to the solo podcasts before, if you hear breaks in the sound, is because I am here by myself and I enjoy drinking while I do these. So tonight I have a glass of whiskey. I'm not a cool guy who drinks like nice whiskey on the rocks or just like straight or whatever. I like cheap whiskey with ice, cheap whiskey on the with ice in the cup. Pour some cheap whiskey, maybe like fill up like half the cup, fill up the other half with just water, regular temperature water, and then a couple squirts of lemon juice on top. That's my shit because it doesn't actually taste like whiskey, and I don't think I really like the taste of whiskey. But I do like that you can make a very good tasting mixed drink with it, with water and lemon juice, because those are 2 things that are easy to have around, and you don't need to buy a ton of them in order to make a ton of mixed drinks. So that's where I'm at. I also may be periodically pausing or mentioning things because I'm recording this in the middle of the Lakers-Nuggets Western Conference Final Game 1. I did bet the Nuggets +7. I don't think that's looking too good right now, but we'll see how it turns out. All right, guys, so let's jump right into these games with those what's the business keeping? Is that like administrative fucking shit out of the way? All right, cool. Let's jump into the games. We're going to start with Buffalo at Miami. Buffalo is a 5.5-point favorite. The over-under here is 41, so we're expecting a pretty low-scoring game. But a low point total did not prevent Buffalo from really being a great fantasy asset in Week 1 against the Jets. I expect that to continue really into Week 2 here because Miami's defense, we know that their outside cornerbacks in Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are strong. We know that they made a lot of upgrades on the defense this year, but their defense hasn't put it together yet, and there's certainly not anything to be afraid of. So Josh Allen looked absolutely great throwing the ball in Week 1, outside of that one missed throw to John Brown in the end zone, which I went 100% Allen, Brown, Diggs, Crowder stacks in DFS this weekend, and man, that touchdown to Allen could have turned me from a nice profitable week to that touchdown to Brown could have turned me from a nice profitable week to potentially the kind of week where I can plan a vacation based on the money that I won. So that was a bit of a bummer to watch him sail that throw to John Brown, but overall, Josh Allen looked really, really good. He threw the ball well. They spread the ball out 4 wide a lot of the time. They got the rookie wide receiver Gabriel Davis involved, as well as Cole Beasley. And they played great. I expect that to continue here in week 2. And I expect Josh Allen to be a great fantasy asset because look what Miami just gave up to Cam Newton on the ground. I mean, Cam had 15 carries for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. And last week, Josh Allen had 15 carries for 70 yards and 1 touchdown himself on the ground. So I expect that to continue. I think Josh Allen is a locked and loaded fantasy start. I don't know if he produces as much through the air, like 300 yards. Again, doesn't really seem likely to me, but solid floor due to that rushing work. And I think you can expect a lot more of it this week. Now, both Stephon Diggs and John Brown, they had solid weeks and solid target numbers, but I don't think either is really a must play in this matchup. I'm not afraid of playing them. But again, we mentioned Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are the 2 starting cornerbacks on the outside. That's the strength of this defense, and that's what they're trying to build around. So I'm not going out of my way to play either one of them. Now, the peripheral pass catchers, I mentioned some of them before. We had Gabriel Davis and Cole Beasley. Both of them were part-time players in this offense, both of them around like 50 to 60% of snaps. I don't think you can really trust either here, nor can you really trust Dawson Knox, who is around the same snap percentage at tight end. So that basically leaves us with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Now, I think both of them worked out as we pretty much expected. About a 55-45 split in terms of snap percentage, 9 carries apiece, 7 targets for Singletary, 4 of them for Moss, and then Moss got the red zone work. So if I drafted either of them, I'm pretty happy with that. I did draft Moss everywhere, and I'm very happy with it. I think I'm ecstatic with the kind of workload that he got, in his first game as a rookie, because I feel like it's only going to go up from there. And he wasn't particularly efficient. Singletary was a little bit more efficient in this game, but in this game against Miami, yeah, why not roll both of them out there? All right, on the Miami side of the ball, it was a pretty bad start. I think that's safe to say, with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing 3 touchdowns. And I don't really see it getting any better this week because they're going up against another elite defense in Buffalo. Devontae Parker is once again questionable after going last week, but then re-aggravating his hamstring and having to leave the game. He only drew 4 targets due to it in that game. And even if he goes this week with that hamstring issue, it's a bad matchup. I want to sit him. I'm not trying to play Devontae Parker unless I absolutely have to. Preston Williams drew 7 targets last week, and Mike Gesicki also drew 5. I think they're both borderline starts if you really need to. But we'll go through a lot of plays, I think, and Vinny and Don also went through a lot of plays that I think are potentially better than both of them here. The backfield was a complete surprise. You had Myles Gaskin leading the way with 63% of the snaps, 9 carries, and was the only back to be targeted. He had 4 of them. It was a surprise because they brought in Jordan Howard and Matt Breida over the offseason. And Breida got 23% of the snaps and Howard got 15. Howard got a lot of work in the snaps that he was in on, but neither of them got any targets. So I don't think you can trust either of the 2 guys that were being drafted there. And then Gaskin, I'm not dying to play, but if I need to, if I needed to pick someone up on the waiver wire that I needed to start this week, I don't think he's the worst you could do. I would prefer him over Frank Gore, who I think might be in a similar situation this week. All right, I'm going to take Buffalo to continue the hot streak here. Moving on to Minnesota, right? Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, Minneapolis. What am I talking about? Minnesota Vikings at the Indianapolis. That's where the Annapolis was coming from. It all makes sense now. Indianapolis Colts. The Colts here are a 3-point favorite with an over-under of 48.5. So we expect a bit of a shootout, or at least Vegas does. Minnesota doesn't seem like they want to have that kind of game. They really fucking wanted to run the ball in the first half against the Packers, but the issue is that their defense is bad. So they were forced to pass it. They've got this brand new secondary. We thought the pass rush might be decent or the line might still be decent. The defensive line wasn't anything, and they were missing players. But Danielle Hunter's still going to be out for a couple of weeks. I don't see this defense getting much better in week 2 against Indy. On the Minnesota side of the ball, though, that's good for their offense because when they passed the ball, it worked. I mean, Cousins went 19 for 25, 259 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. That's not bad. And then Adam Thielen went 8 targets, 6 catches, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's great. I started Thielen in a couple leagues. I played him in a daily lineup, and all of it worked out really well for me. So big fan of that. Hope it continues. And in this matchup that we expect to be high scoring, I think it's going to. Now, the rest of their pass game is not really something to target. And we kind of knew that going into the season, though maybe we were intrigued by a couple options. Both Justin Jefferson and BC Johnson were part-time players, both of them between 60 and 70% snap share. And neither of them commanded many targets. I don't really expect either of them to going forward. And at the tight end position, Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. were also both around 60% of snaps, neither of them really commanding any sort of decent target share. So it's Thielen. I don't think Cousins is the worst start that you can make, but I'm also not actively trying to start him. 2 QB league, fucking knock yourself out. But yeah, not really for me. The running back situation was a little bit concerning because while Dalvin Cook did work out, he got in the end zone. He split work and snaps with Alexander Madison. Now, Cook had 58% of the snaps. He used that for 12 carries, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but only 2 targets, 1 catch for -2 yards on 8 routes run. That's not spectacular pass game work. And on Madison's side, he had 4 targets, and he caught all 4 of them for 30 yards, 11 routes run. So the routes run were pretty similar. Maybe it was just Madison, they happened to need to check down on those plays. Like, I'm not freaking out yet about Madison's usage because he did have half the carries and only 37% of the snaps. But it's not good. It's not what we wanted. I think for Dalvin Cook, what we were looking for was 18 opportunities. So, carries plus targets, like get 18 of them, which is going to lead to, 16 to 18 touches in a game for the running back. So that's, I think, what we were looking for and what we drafted him for, as well as the goal line usage, which he did get. But yeah, definitely concerning and something we need to keep an eye on going forward. I'm not doing anything like sitting him, and I'm sure Madison was already owned. I don't think he should be played, so you can comfortably leave him on your bench. For Indianapolis, I mentioned before, the Minnesota D is bad, and Phillip is going to sling the ball around. So, this is a great offensive line. I think they're just going to bully the Minnesota defensive line. So Phillip, I'm a fan of. I think he's a good fantasy start this week, and we'll see how it works out. The run game is going to be interesting because the big story of week 1, outside of them losing to fucking Jacksonville, was that Marlon Mack tore his Achilles and he's out for the year. So now, rather than the unpredictable Mack, Taylor, Hines backfield, and we saw a glimpse of how unpredictable it was when Mack came out and got the bulk of the work, and then Hines scored a touchdown right away. It is now a Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines backfield, and that means both of them are starts. Because one other thing we learned, or was confirmed for us this past week, is that Phillip Rivers fucking loves throwing to the running back. 17 targets, I believe, or no, sorry, more than that, because Hines had 8 and Taylor had 6. So that's 18 right there. And then Mack had a couple before he left the game as well. So, Jonathan Taylor, most targets he's had in a game in his college and pro career. So good sign that they're willing to use him in the pass game going forward. He looked pretty good. He had some more carries. He had 9 carries, whereas Hines had 7 of them. Both of them are starts. I mean, Taylor is obviously going to be the guy who, if someone breaks out, it's going to be him in this backfield. But yeah, right now they're both starts, and they're both comfortable starts because Phillip is just going to use them both. Think about those Melvin Ingram, Danny Woodhead backfields. Think about the Melvin, I keep fucking up names, Melvin Gordon, Danny Woodhead, and then Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler. Like, both guys were relevant. That's what this is to me. And the offensive line is great, which they never had in San Diego either. or Los Angeles, I guess, both of them. And so it's just a great situation for these running backs, and owning either of them is going to be a good situation for you. The wide receivers on this team, we definitely learned a lot as well because, T.Y. Hilton obviously was going to be a full-time player, but Paris Campbell was the other full-time player. My bet was on Michael Pittman Jr. to take that role. I was wrong. It was Paris Campbell. They're clearly the number one and the number two. They both had 9 targets and 103 air yards, and they're both good starts going forward, particularly in this shootout matchup against a bad defense. The previously mentioned Michael Pittman Jr. and Zach Pascal both split snaps behind them, and they combined for 5 targets, so not nearly the usage. I think if you drafted Pittman, you can probably just drop him at this point and pick up someone who's, actually getting used right now. The other news for this week is that Jack Doyle is out. Jack Doyle is a guy who we probably would have said to play this week if he was going to be playing, but he's not. So we're looking at Mo Alley-Cox behind him. And Mo Alley-Cox is a guy who's big and athletic, former college basketball player. You've heard it a million times. But he's a guy they've used in the red zone before. Even this past week, he had 2 catches for 20 yards on 39% of their snaps. I don't think you need to get cute with him in season long. And I haven't really checked the DFS prices yet. That's kind of my Saturday move is to do all of my DFS research and finalize all of that. But Mo Alley-Cox could make a nice little punt DFS play if you're really trying to spend down at tight end so you can spend up at other positions. I don't know that it's really necessary because there's a ton of value on this slate as it is. But if you're trying to, do something contrarian, pay up everywhere else, Mo Alley-Cox might work in there for you as a punt play at tight end. I am going to take Indy in this game. I think they get past that week 1 debacle and beat Minnesota. Moving on to Detroit at Green Bay. Green Bay is a 6-point favorite with an over-under of 49. So again, we expect Green Bay's offense to be pretty prolific here. And anytime you're a team like Detroit where you're playing, with the 6-point spread isn't spectacular. It's not what you want, but Green Bay's defense is not great right now. So Detroit, I think, has a better look at some fantasy points than people might think based on what they did week 1 against the Bears. So Green Bay's offense, and again, DVOA after week 1 is not necessarily the best thing in the world to use. But 23rd in pass DVOA, 30th in rush DVOA. They weren't good against Minnesota. They just put up a shitload of points. And even in the pass rush, Green Bay had a 16% pressure rate in week 1. I believe Detroit's was 15%. So we're looking at 2 teams where the quarterback is likely going to have some time behind the line. We both know what these quarterbacks can do with that sort of thing. This could really be a high-scoring affair that could have a lot of fantasy points on both sides of the equation. The bad thing for Detroit, starting with them, is that Kenny Golladay is out again. So it makes it tough to start Matthew Stafford. And I did bench him for Matt Ryan in one league where I was playing him. But, you might not have Matt Ryan on just sitting on the waivers in every league. It might be a situation where you need to go a bit deeper. And I certainly don't mind playing Stafford in this matchup. The receiver situation was a little unexpected because we had Quintez Cephus, who the beat writers were saying Marvin Hall was going to start for Kenny Golladay. He did not. It was rookie Quintez Cephus. And Cephus led the Lions with 10 targets. He led them in air yards with 117. He only turned it into 3 catches for 43 yards. But, the intent was there. It just didn't work. And like we said, this is not a good defense for the Packers. So, it was one game. It's hard to put too much into one game. But Quintez Cephus might be a pick that could work out for you this week. I'm sorry. I think my computer might have just fucked up. I'm not entirely sure. If it did, I apologize if Shrek didn't edit this out. All right, back to it. With these Lions wide receivers. Now, besides Cephus, Marvin Jones had 8 targets. Danny Amendola had 7. Amendola turned that into 5 catches for 81 yards. I think Marvin turned it into 6 for 51 or something like that. not bad usage for either guy. And again, in a matchup that we like, I don't think really either of them is a bad play. Marvin is definitely not going to be highly owned in DFS because I think he burned a lot of people this past week. So maybe that's worth taking a look at. Marvin Jones, I haven't checked his prices there, but none of these wide receivers are must plays, but I'm not really against them. It's sort of a team specific and matchup specific situation. TJ Hawkinson, his usage was pretty disappointing week one. We were kind of looking at him as a breakout, maybe a guy who could take some of those targets that Kenny Golladay gave up by being injured. And it was disappointing. He only played 64% of the snaps. He had 5 catches on 5 targets for 56 yards, which isn't bad, but not what we wanted to see. And it doesn't make me confident in necessarily starting him this week, though there are definitely worse starts. So again, I don't think anyone in this passing offense is a bad start. They're just not priority starts for me, if that makes sense. The running back situation was confusing and disappointing because this is a team that has spent second-round picks on running backs in each of the past 2 years. I believe Carry-On might have been 3 years ago. I forget. And then they brought in Adrian Peterson, and he just got the most work. Now, DeAndre Swift still led in running back snaps at 44%. Peterson was at 31%, and Carry-On was at 26%. But Peterson got 14 carries for 93 yards. He added in 3 catches for 21 yards on 3 targets. Carry-On got 7 carries for 14 yards and no targets. And then Swift got 3 carries. He did get 1 touchdown off of those, which seems kind of fluky. And then he had 3 catches for 15 yards on 5 targets. He did drop a game-winning touchdown. Obviously shitty. I don't think it's something they're really going to punish. But who knows? It's Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia does weird shit. So yeah, in conclusion there, if I'm going to be ranking the running backs, it's I guess going to be Peterson, Swift, and Carry-On. I think Swift has a chance at a pretty decent game in this one because I expect them to be playing from behind, whereas they were playing from in front for most of the other game. So maybe switch Swift and Peterson, but none of them are priority starts, and you should be actively looking to not play any of them, I think is the correct move there. All right, for Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers of old, and we know it was against a bad defense in Minnesota that wasn't able to generate pressure on them. But this is a bad defense in Detroit that's also not going to be able to generate pressure on them. Detroit's top 3 cornerbacks are all injured. I don't know for sure that Okudah and Trufant are going to be out, but they both do have hamstring issues. And Justin Coleman, the slot corner, is definitely out. So Aaron Rodgers, I talked about how Detroit's pressure rate was not good. Aaron Rodgers is going to have time to do exactly what he did last week. And I know sometimes it feels like chasing performances to be like, Rodgers is going to do it again, Devontae is going to do it again. But like, fuck, all signs point to them doing it again. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers is a great start. He's a great play in DFS. You know, the Millie Maker lineup this past week was a Rodgers Devontae stack. I think they might have used Lazard as well, and then brought it back with probably Marvin Jones, but I don't think that mattered. But anyway, the Millie Maker lineup this past week was a Rodgers Devontae stack. I don't see any reason that it can't be this week too. And, you know, it's going to be highly owned, but it should be. I guess talking of Devontae, we'll get right into him. 17 targets, 14 catches, 156 yards, and 2 touchdowns. If you drafted Devontae Adams, you could not be happier with that performance. And like I said, there's no reason to expect that he does anything different this week. This should be another huge Devontae game. Roll him out there with all the confidence in the world. Behind him, it's a less clear situation. Allen Lazard was on the field for 87% of the snaps, compared to only 54% for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But MVS did have 2 more targets and a ton more air yards. So I think it's pretty clear that he is the situational deep threat, and he's going to have big games, MVS. But, you know, Lazard is out there more. I don't think either of them needs to be played. They should both probably be owned. But I also don't hate playing them because we expect this to be a shootout. So I'm trying to think. So ranking the receivers in this game, obviously Devontae, I think after that, I'm going to go Marvin Jones. I'm going to go Quintez Cephas. I'm going to go Danny Amendola, then Lazard, then MVS. And I think those are that's the floor rankings. Maybe you would switch around Amendola and Cephas if we're talking just at floors. But I think Cephas has a lot bigger of a ceiling as well. So I think that's how I'd rank the receivers in this game. Paris Campbell, I think, is a guy who I would probably rank ahead of maybe even Jones and definitely ahead of the rest of the guys. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of these receivers, because I know I've been saying a lot of the same things for them, which is it's not a bad play, but I'm not prioritizing it. But, it's true. Wide receivers hard to predict, and sometimes you just need to attach peripheral pieces of a high-scoring game, which we expect this to be. The backfield for Green Bay worked out how we wanted it to this past week, where Aaron Jones had 54% of the snaps, but he got the majority of the carries. He got a touchdown. He got 6 targets. Yay for Aaron Jones. Jamal Williams also got 40% of the snaps, and then Tyler Ervin and A.J. Dillon both saw a handful of snaps, though Tyler Ervin actually, I think, played 21%. I think he had 14 snaps in this game. Didn't do a ton with them. Obviously ranking these guys, it's Jones, Williams, Ervin, and Dillon. And Jones is the clear play. He's the only guy you should be playing. You shouldn't be playing Jamal Williams. But just know there are going to be weeks when, Williams gets a touchdown and Aaron Jones doesn't, or A.J. Dillon gets a goal line look and Aaron Jones doesn't. So, Jones is still a comfortable play, particularly in this kind of game environment. But be aware that this is a split backfield, and it's split kind of between 4 guys, to varying degrees. We'll see if A.J. Dillon can increase his workload as the season goes on. I'm going to take Green Bay here. I think if Golladay was playing, I might pick Detroit for the upset, but Green Bay seems like too good of a pick at this point. All right, the last game before we take a quick break is going to be Washington at Arizona. Both teams 1-0. How about that? In games where they were not favored. Arizona in this game is favored. They are a 6.5-point favorite with an over-under of 46.5. Now, starting on the Washington side of the ball, I think the first thing to mention is that Washington's defense is legit. Again, I said DVOA is not gospel after 1 week, but they're first in defense DVOA. This pass rush is good. And when we talk about Arizona's side, we'll say that Arizona's offensive line might not be that good. So, interesting stuff there, but let's talk about the Washington offense. I don't think you need to get cute. You do not need to play Dwayne Haskins. There are really only 2 plays that you need to be making here. Terry McLaurin, I know he only got 7 targets. I know he only got 5 catches. It's fine. Don't worry about McLaurin. McLaurin's going to be just peaches. He's going to rebound. Keep putting him in your lineup. The other play that, we could have predicted a little bit, but it was more of just inklings. It was more of a hunch. Logan Thomas seems to be for real after 1 week. And, it was 1 week. I remember TJ Hawkinson got 11 targets last year in week 1, and that never happened again. So who knows? But Logan Thomas led the Washington football team in targets with 8 of them, and he led them in air yards with 72 of them. And that's a starting tight end in fantasy football. I am very disappointed in myself because I debated for the beginning part of the week in one league whether to drop Austin Hooper, a guy who I just got egregiously late. He just kind of slipped to me. And whether I should pick up Logan Thomas. And I was like, no, give Hooper another week, particularly against this Bengals defense. And Hooper didn't do jack shit in that game last night. So I'm going to watch Logan Thomas go nuts in this game and be pretty upset. It is also a Logan Thomas revenge game, as he did get drafted by Arizona several moons ago. We should talk about the running backs, even though you don't want to play any of them. You might be tempted to play Peyton Barber. Don't. He had 17 carries for 29 yards. He fell into the end zone twice. He's playing for now. He's getting the carries, but how long can you really control that backfield? I don't know. McKissick led in snaps and targets over all the running backs. And then Antonio Gibson looked the best. I mean, he's just good, and the rest of the guys aren't. So I think it's a matter of time on Antonio Gibson taking over this backfield. But we know sometimes it takes coaches longer to put in talented rookies than we want it to. And that's just the thing that happens in the NFL for a variety of reasons, whether it's mental miscues, pass blocking, them just not trusting the rookies yet and trusting Peyton Barber for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, it's a weird situation, and it just should be completely avoided at this point. If you are going to stash any of them, it should be Antonio Gibson, clearly. For Arizona, I said before, Washington's D-line is very, very good. The pass rush is legit, and Brandon Thorne of Established the Run and the Athletic has the Cardinals ranked as his 29th offensive line. Now, the Cardinals work around that because Kingsbury draws up a lot of things to sort of minimize that, quick drops, moving Kyler in the pocket, that sort of thing. They're good at disguising how bad their offensive line is. But still, it's a bad offensive line with a good pass rush. So what that says to me is they are going to do more of the quick drops, more of the getting the ball out, more of the moving the pocket. And that's exactly what they had to do against the San Francisco defensive line this past week. So who had a good game this past week? That's who's going to have a good game this week. I think it's like really obvious what to do with the Cardinals. And it's start Kyler. It's start DeAndre Hopkins, who I will take the L on after 1 week. I said there was no way he gets 150 targets in this offense. And he comes out and gets 16 in week 1. So fuck me, Vinny, I'm going to owe you the money or beer or whatever the hell we bet. I'll have to go back and listen to the podcast. But yeah, I was wrong. And if you avoided drafting him because of me, I apologize. That was a mistake on my part. That being said, he has a low average depth of target. He is clearly a high frequency, within 15 yards type of guy in this offense. And that's going to work again this week. Now, I think you're going to see a lot of people on Christian Kirk because he did get 5 targets and he got 64 air yards, 13.5 yard average depth of target. So he appears to be a bit more of a down the field guy for them. But it didn't work this past week, and I don't think it's going to work this week against another good pass rush. There will be Christian Kirk weeks this year. Week 2 is not one of them. I specifically said it that way so you can clip it and laugh at me when it just like is or whatever. But to me, it doesn't make sense for this to be a Christian Kirk week. And I think he's getting hyped up a little bit more than he should be based on what I think we should be expecting. Now in the backfield, Kenyon Drake is a definite go, even with the split with Chase Edmonds, who was actually split out wide for some snaps, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, Drake's a start. It's pretty simple stuff. Edmonds, we'll see. You might get lucky with him, like catching a long ball or, getting enough PPR points or getting in the end zone. I don't think he's really like a start yet. Maybe he's a flex consideration. Maybe we'll see again some short yardage passing situations where they target him this week, but Edmonds definitely should be owned. I don't think he should be played just yet. Kenyon Drake, you can play pretty reliably. And in this game, fuck it, let's take Washington for another upset. Why not? Let's see if that works out. All right, guys, before we jump into the last 4 games of the Week 2 preview, want to let you know that it is a very specific season right now. And I'm not talking about football season because it's also basketball season, and it's also baseball season and hockey season, and the Premier League just started back up, so it's soccer season too. But what all of that makes it is it's winning season, because winning season returns at MyBookie. Now, winning season, what does that mean? It means doubling for your first deposit. It means insane props, epic bonuses, and the craziest cross-sport wagers. I just talked about all the sports that are happening right now. Might as well bet on a bunch of them at the same time. It's fucking sweet. At MyBookie, winning season means watching live sports and betting live sports all season long. So rejoice. The NFL has returned. That means action-packed Sundays and huge cash prizes. Get in on the action by using promo code Let's Talk. That's all capitals. Let's Talk. Yes, I had to double check, make sure I had the right code, and I did. And by using that code, you will double your first deposit. New players get up to $1,000 in free play, designed to add more excitement to the sports you love and the games you bet. So bet with the best this NFL season for your chance to win big. Again, that's use promo code Let's Talk and double your first deposit. That's up to $1,000. Your winning season begins today, but only at MyBookie. And MyBookie actually is what I used to bet the Bengals at +6 last night, which they scored a touchdown at the end. Fat Randy hit a field goal, and we like to call that a backdoor cover, ladies and gentlemen. So if you like backdoor covers, if you like betting on the Nuggets at +7 to beat the Lakers, then you're going to love MyBookie. And you know, I've been betting on it for a while here. I made some money on the NFL draft and have proceeded to punt a lot of that off on golf over the off season. But hey, it's been a ton of fun. Great place to bet. It's where I'm betting, and I love it. That last part wasn't even part of the ad read. I'm just like actually a customer saying good things. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break so I can take a leak, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We still have 4 more games to get through, and through the magic of audio, or I don't know, maybe Shrek played a bumper there or something, you didn't have to deal with like the 5 minutes or so that I took a leak and poured a new whiskey drink. That other one, dude, by the time I got to the bottom of it, it tasted like straight up lemon juice. I don't know if like the lemon juice I got is like strong, or it's like it takes like a while to release, because I don't know, it just tasted really bad. It tasted like bad lemon juice. So this one I put a lot less lemon juice in, and this one tastes like whiskey. So that's not spectacular either, but at least it doesn't taste like actively like gross. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that works for me. All right, but we do have 4 more games to get through, so we are going to get through them, and we're going to start with Baltimore at Houston. Baltimore's a 7-point favorite here with an over-under of 51.5. So another one that we expect to be high scoring. Lots of games that are pretty high scoring this week. It feels like there should be a lot of fantasy juice this week. You might need more fantasy points than your typical week to get a win. So on the Baltimore side of the ball, I think Baltimore has remained easy for the most part, like it was last year, with a couple little wrinkles, and those wrinkles are in the backfield. So we'll do the passing game first and then get into the backfield. Lamar is like a no-duh situation. He threw 3 touchdowns. He still looks great. He can still run. He's still Lamar. Houston's defense sucks. What more do you need? Then Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews are the other 2 pass game options. So, neither of them saw significant targets this past week just because they didn't have to throw the ball around too much. But Andrews got 2 touchdowns. One of them was a sick one-handed grab. He's great. Hollywood is also great. He went over 100 yards on just 5 catches. They're no-brainer plays, I think, until further notice. The backfield is a little weird. No running back had more than 39% of the snaps, and no running back saw any targets last week. Now, J.K. Dobbins, the rookie, was actually the guy with the 39% of snaps. Mark Ingram had about 36, I believe, and then Gus Edwards had, I think, about 25. So it is a 3-way split, but Dobbins appears to be the lead guy. It's hard to really say, though, because it was a blowout. So what do you do there? None of them were particularly efficient. Again, none of them got any work through the pass game. Dobbins saw the goal line work and got 2 touchdowns because of it, but I don't know if that's as much of an indicator of like, oh, he's the goal line back, or it was just like he was in then, or like it was his turn to be in for that set of downs or whatever. So I don't think we can draw too much of a conclusion there, but I think Ingram and Dobbins are both still viable starts. They're, again, not must starts, but they are viable starts, and it's very team specific for those sorts of situations. Not guys that I would be considering in daily. Now, on the Houston side of the ball, you're not going to sit Deshaun, but it's not a good matchup. The Baltimore D is an excellent play here because Deshaun likes to hold the ball. They don't have a great offensive line. Like, they're going to get sacks. They're probably going to get turnovers. Now, Deshaun's still probably going to produce. And when he does produce in the pass game, it's going to be to Will Fuller, is what we learned week 1. Will Fuller had 10 targets. That was by far the lead for the team. He also led the team in air yards. That was about it. Randall Cobb played about the same snaps as Will Fuller, but he was barely used. He got 2 targets and wasn't targeted until the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. I know because I put him in my captain spot in the showdown slate on DraftKings, and that didn't work. But yeah, in the pass game, it really looks like Will Fuller, and that's it. You might think to get cute with Jordan Akins. He's a part-time player who got 2 targets and happened to catch a touchdown. So not in consideration for me. The only other player for Houston that is in consideration is David Johnson. And he is, again, worth starting as he looked very good in week 1. Now, this is a better defense than the Chiefs, and we know that, so it might be a bit of a different story. But Duke Johnson is questionable after hurting himself in week 1. So, with Duke at best limited and at worst out, you have to start David Johnson in this situation because he's going to get all the running work and some of the passing work as well. So, good start, solid start there. And again, he looked good. He looked not like old David Johnson, but he looked good. So that's what you're really looking for in that situation. I'm going to take Baltimore there. I don't know if I've taken a dog yet. Oh, yeah, I took Washington. They're a dog. Probably should take one more dog before this. Oh, yeah, that's going to be an easy one. All right, cool. Moving on, Kansas City at the Los Angeles Chargers. You would think it would be a different sort of situation with no fans in Los Angeles, but it's what their normal games are like. That's such a hack joke. Why did I even start that? I'm pissed at myself. Anyway, Kansas City, 8.5-point favorite with an over-under of 47. And I think I'm going to hammer the Chiefs there on that side of the line. Like, the Chiefs are going to win this game, and they're going to win it by a lot. I think 8.5 is not nearly as much as it should be. The Chargers have a good pass defense, and they have a good pass rush too. But like, you're playing everyone that you normally would in this situation. I would expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which I just learned in the last game. It's Edwards-Helaire, so the H is silent rather than Edwards-Helaire. How about that? I think he's going to go off in this game. They're heavy favorites. The Los Angeles run defense is not nearly as formidable as their pass defense. And it just seems like a great spot for him. Start him without a second thought. And then everyone else you normally would. I mean, Mahomes, I know Hill only got 6 targets in week 1. You're not benching Tyreek Hill, and he's burned the Chargers enough times in his life that I wouldn't be surprised if he catches a long touchdown. Sammy Watkins led the team in targets and played a full complement of snaps alongside Tyreek Hill. He had 9 targets this past week. He's another guy I would be starting here. Like, why not? It's the Chiefs. They're really good. Travis Kelce, obviously. And then I don't think you can start DeMarcus Robinson or Mecole Hardman, who are both part-time players. It's just not really worth it. And maybe in matchups against worse pass defenses in the future, like in this season, it'll be worth it. Or if one of those guys, separates himself from the other. But right now, it's really just not worth it. Well, that tastes a lot more like whiskey than the first one. That's probably good. That's probably a good thing. All right. The Chargers are more or less an avoid for me. I mean, Tyrod looked pretty awful, and they have a banged-up offensive line, and the Chiefs got a 40% pressure rate against Houston in week 1. And I know I said that Houston's got a bad offensive line too, but the Chiefs can get after the quarterback a little bit, even though their defense isn't great. So, I'm looking at this as a situation where the Chiefs' defense is a full go. Tyrod is unplayable until he proves that he is. And then I know Mike Williams, he led the team with 9 targets and 143 air yards in week 1. But that was against the Bengals pass rush that wasn't doing anything. I don't think Tyrod's going to have the time this game. So I'm not buying Mike Williams this week, though I think there will be Mike Williams weeks. I mentioned in the preseason, and week 1 kind of proved me right as much as week 1 can prove anyone right on anything, the sample size and everything. But I I thought Mike Williams was in for a big season because Tyrod likes chucking it deep. He's the deep play guy. Pretty simple math there. And it seemed like that was correct. Again, 9 targets, 143 air yards. That's pretty good. And he had a couple crazy catches that he caught just out of bounds. One of them was in the end zone, just out of bounds. So, I think Mike Williams will get there in games this year. This isn't one of them. To me, I want to target the lower ADOT type of guys. So that's Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry, who each had 8 targets in week 1. And if they can each get 8 targets in this game, I think they both kind of pay off for the most part. The interesting situation here is the backfield, where we know Austin Eckler was so prolific in the past game in past years, particularly last year. Austin Eckler saw 19 carries and only 1 target in week 1. And Anthony Lynn said basically this wasn't a fluke. He said this offense isn't designed to get checkdowns to the running back. Now, if you're using Austin Eckler, then why the fuck do you have Austin Eckler? Be smart about it. Like, use him in ways that accentuate his skill set. Split him out in the slot. Do whatever the hell you can to do it. That being said, this is the week. Like, if Austin Eckler doesn't get targets this week in a game where they're likely going to be playing from behind for 3 of the 4 quarters, when is he? So I'm going to bet he does get the targets in this game, despite what Anthony Lynn says, and that he puts together a nice little game. Josh Kelly, I don't think this is the week for him. He looked great in week 1, 12 carries, 60 yards, 1 touchdown. He got the goal line work after Justin Jackson went out injured, so that's important. But this is not the game for him. This is not the game where we want the backup, grind him out goal line guy. We want the pass catching guy. And despite the week 1 target, that's still Eckler. So Kelly, pick him up, stash him. That's great. I picked him up and turned him into Brandon Ayuk in one league to see what that was like. It's probably the first time I've ever traded a guy straight up that I just picked up that morning. And it felt pretty good to be like, I just picked up this guy on the scrap heap and got a 10th round pick out of it. Pretty cool. But anyway, not the game for Josh Kelly. And it's really a show me game for Austin Eckler. And I'm hoping that he does show it. I'm picking Kansas City in this game. Not going to get cute there. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, a good matchup, New England at Seattle. We've got Seattle as a 4-point favorite. The over-under is 45. Big stories out of both of these teams, and we're going to start with New England. The story there was Cam. I mean, Cam threw the ball fine, but 15 carries for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's still a great play this week. Cam is a fantasy starter if they are going to use him as they did during week 1. So, we're banking on the rushing production. We're not really banking on the passing production as much, but we don't need to if the rushing production is there. So, yeah, pick up Cam if he wasn't drafted. If you have him on your team, good for you. In DFS, I don't know if this is really the week that I'm trying to use him. I haven't looked at his price. It's obviously very dependent on that. But, he's a viable start. In terms of the rest of the team, I'm having trouble finding viable starts. I think you still trust Edelman, who, he had 7 targets in week 1. He led the team in air yards. N'Keal Harry could have had a big week on 6 targets, but he fumbled a ball out of the end zone that could have been a touchdown. I'm not buying Harry yet. I'm still buying Edelman as the guy. Harry should definitely be owned, but that's a different story. At running back, literally none of them are playable, and there's several reasons for this. The first of all being Rex Burkhead, Sony Michel, and James White all had exactly 30% of the snaps in week 1, so they all had 19 snaps. If I was going to play one of them, it would be James White, just for the pass-catching upside. But for the rest of them, Cam's the fucking goal line back. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. Like, you can't have a 30% like 3-way split. You can't have a 3-way split at running back and not have any of the running backs have touchdown equity. It's just not going to work in terms of playability for fantasy. So don't even try. It's fine to have any of them rostered. Obviously, White, I would say, is the most viable to be rostered. Sorry if you're hearing a fire truck outside my house. But yeah, you can't play any of them if Cam's going to be rushing for those touchdowns. You just can't do it. So I said there were big stories on each side. The big story in Seattle was, as the meme goes, as the hashtag goes, the Seahawks let Russ cook. Russ was allowed to be Russ. He wasn't trapped in this run-first offense for really the first time in his career, because the Seahawks' offensive strategy has been run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Oh, we're fucked. Let Russ pull something out of his ass and we win. For as long as they've had him. And week one, who knows, it's just week one, but week one was not the same. They let Russ be the focal point of the offense, and what do you know? It worked. When you let the most efficient quarterback in the NFL be the focal point of your offense instead of the running game, it works for you, and you win football games. That being said, they did it against a terrible Atlanta defense that's currently dead last in DVOA among all defenses. So, can Russ continue to cook against this vaunted New England secondary? That's the big question. I don't have the answer, but you can't fucking sit him. So you got to be playing Russ. You got to be playing Tyler Lockett. You got to be playing DK Metcalf. Each of them had 8 targets. They both had a solid amount of air yards. DK obviously more than Lockett, as he is more of that deep ball threat for them. The Nuggets are down by 20. I'm not going to cover that 7 points, am I? Oh well. The other interesting play maybe in the past game that you might have seen was Greg Olsen. He got in the end zone. He only had 4 targets, though, which was an 11% target share. To me, that's probably not worth it, particularly in this much tougher matchup against New England. So I am off Greg Olsen. I think if you were looking for tight end, look to Logan Thomas. Look to a guy we'll talk about. Well, he probably got drafted. Never mind. But look to Logan Thomas, and then from there, kind of figure out your options. And if you have specific questions, please ask us. We will answer them. Ask us on Instagram, email, Twitter, however you want to. But yeah, Greg Olsen, not really for me. Breaking down the running backs, we saw Chris Carson get 45% of the snaps. Carlos Hyde, 34%, and he did get the goal line work. And then Travis Homer, 21%. Now, to me, Carson is the only guy who's playable, particularly in this matchup, because he sees both carries and targets. He got 6 of each in week 1, and we know Carson's a talented guy who can do it. So I think his upside is not as high as it was in past years because, again, it looks like Hyde might be the goal line guy. We don't want to write that in stone just yet after 1 week, but things are looking to be in that direction. But yeah, Carson's a safe floor guy in this matchup, and particularly with New England's the strength of their defense being the secondary. You might think that Carson might be used a little bit more in the pass game, and again, he did get 6 targets in week 1, so we like that a lot. I am going to take Seattle in this game. I refuse to take New England there. So we will move on to Monday Night Football. The New Orleans Saints at the grand opening of the beautiful new stadium that kind of looks like a Roomba if you look at it from the top, in Las Vegas, Nevada, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. New Orleans is a 6-point favorite with an over-under of 50.5, so this is expected to be a very high-scoring game. And I think I'm going to hammer this under. I think I disagree with that because the big story on New Orleans' side of the ball is that Michael Thomas is out. It's a high ankle sprain. That's an issue. That's an explosion-sucking injury. And I know he says, don't put me on IR, I'll come back sooner. Michael Thomas might be fucked until the end of the year. So hopefully you have a good team around him because I wouldn't expect much from him for the next 6 weeks or so. That being said, it's a good matchup for the Saints, and these targets have to go somewhere. So let's figure out where they should go. In week 1, they went to Alvin Kamara. He had 8 of them. And Jared Cook, he had 7 of them. And I think I would expect more of that. Kamara, to me, is like the smash play of this game. An obvious play. Just because he's used in the pass game, he's used in the run game. The Raiders' defense isn't very good. The Raiders' linebackers... See, I'm interested to see because they signed a couple good pass coverage linebackers, Corey Littleton being the main guy. Nick Kwiatkowski got hurt in the first game, and their defense was actually significantly worse after that happened, which, small sample size, you don't want to draw too many conclusions. But these are good pass coverage linebackers. So I'm interested to see if the middle of the field becomes something that the Raiders are better against this year. And in week 1, you saw McCaffrey get only 3 targets. Super rare for him, a guy who, had 120 targets overall last year. So 3 targets for McCaffrey. Again, new coaching staff. You don't want to read too much into it. And Ian Thomas, the tight end, only got 2 targets in that game. The wide receivers really dominated the passing targets. But the 2 best pass catchers on this team are the running back and the tight end. So I think it's more likely that was just the way that Matt Rule drew up week 1 for the Panthers than the Raiders are now elite against pass catching running backs and tight ends. So I think Kamara and Cook, you start with confidence and with a ton of confidence going into this week. Would expect them to be, heavily targeted. On the outside, your 2 starting wide receivers you would think would be Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith. Sanders is obviously the higher floor guy. He had 5 targets in week 1, so pretty good. Traquan Smith, I believe, had 2. Smith is like a deep ball, kind of like Hail Mary shot in the dark type of guy, and I wouldn't recommend starting him, but I'm fine with starting Emmanuel Sanders. The Raiders cornerbacks are young and unproven, if nothing else. And Robbie Anderson got free for a big play this past week. DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel both got targeted heavily despite not really producing as much. So I don't know. It's tough to draw conclusions on the Raiders and their defense because it is so changed. Also because the team that they played, we didn't know what to expect from them. So in situations like that, I think we expect what we kind of cancel out all the factors and just expect what we would normally, which is going to be Kamara, Cook, and then Sanders in that order being your pass-catching options. Traquan Smith, again, a deep threat. I know the over-under is 50.5, and I know the Saints are favorites. I'm still not starting Drew Brees. I know, again, the Bucs defense is much, much better than the Raiders defense is. But Drew Brees didn't show the ability to push the ball downfield at all. I'm going to be betting the under on this one pretty significantly. And I'm actually going to do that the second I get off this podcast because I'm realizing how egregious it is. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think Brees is really worth the start. So let's move to the Raiders side of the ball. Their offense looked great in week 1, but New Orleans is, again, a much better defense than Carolina is. And Henry Ruggs, who looked spectacular before he got hurt, and he did come back, and he just didn't look as explosive after that. He's likely going to play again, but I don't think you should really start him because he's a guy who relies on his 4.2 speed. And if he has a leg injury, then that's obviously in jeopardy. So Ruggs, to me, is not a start. I don't think you should start any Raiders wide receiver in this situation. The other ones are, of course, Hunter Renfrow, Bryan Edwards, and Nelson Aguilar. Aguilar caught a touchdown. The other 2 guys really weren't involved in week 1, which was surprising because Renfrow was a pretty big part of the offense last year when he did play. The guys you should be looking to are Darren Waller, who saw 8 targets, only 28 air yards, so very close to the line of scrimmage type usage. But they are going to need to feed him the ball in this game, and I think you can safely start him without much worry there. And then the real story of the game for the Raiders was Josh Jacobs, man. 25 carries, 93 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And then even bigger than that, 6 targets, 4 catches, 46 yards on 78% of the snaps. And the reason that's such a big deal is because despite the fact that Josh Jacobs was an excellent pass-catching running back in college, the Raiders used him as an early down grinder last year. And we thought that was probably going to be their usage this year because they re-signed Jalen Richard. They brought in Devontae Booker. They brought in and then got rid of guys like Lynn Bowden and Theo Riddick. And Booker got some role. Jalen Richard barely played. But Josh Jacobs played 78% of the snaps and got 6 targets. If Josh Jacobs is a 3-down running back this year, he's going to finish as a top 5 running back based on Dalvin Cook not really getting the snaps week 1. And just his ceiling is unlimited at this point. Like, we know he's a great runner. We know he's good when he catches the ball. So if they're going to use him in both situations, fucking perfect. And hopefully they continue to do that. Hopefully this wasn't a 1-week mirage due to some sort of weird Panthers defense sort of thing. We'll find out soon. But yeah, it looks great for Josh Jacobs. And if you drafted him, congratulations. I did not. I did play him in daily in a couple lineups. Loved that this past week. But yeah, good for you. And I hope it works out. I am taking the under, and I think I'm going to parlay it with the Raiders when I actually do this, just to, maybe I don't know. Maybe I won't. That seems like a little much. I'm going to take the Raiders, though, in this game, because I think if they can grind the ball with Josh Jacobs and their defense can keep what really shouldn't be in, like if they can keep Kamara in check and they can be effective with Josh Jacobs, the Raiders have a good shot at winning this game. So I'm taking the Raiders as my other upset here, and they're going to win their home opener in Las Vegas at the stadium that looks like a Zumba. All right, guys, that is it for the Week 2 preview. Again, if you missed Part 1, I'm glad you listened to Part 2, but definitely go back, listen to Vinny and Don. They put out a ton of great information. It was spectacular to hear Don back on the podcast, and surprisingly enough, it didn't get completely off the rails between the two of them, which I was a little disappointed at, but hey, what can you do? I feel like I might have gotten a little more off the rails by myself than the two of them did there. But if you guys do have questions, if you follow us on Instagram, we're putting out, constantly asking for questions. Make sure to send them to us. We'll get them answered. We'll answer through whatever situation you want us to, whether it's email, Facebook, Twitter, the website, letstalkfantasyfootball.com. However you want to get in touch with us, just please do, and we'll try and answer your questions to the best of our abilities, and we'll try and be there all year for you. So thank you guys very much for listening. Thank you for listening to Part 2 of the Week 2 preview. For Let's Talk Fantasy Football, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.